There's a fundamental inconsistency to the Calvinist critique of Molinism. I'm not a Molinist. I don't subscribe to Molinism. It is a viable theory. Um, I think Calvinists would be better off. It would just present itself as a theory and move on, but that's not the case, as we are all aware. So anytime I hear the word Infralapsarian and Supralapsarian, up to this point my brain has just shut down because I don't know what those terms mean. I'm not deep enough into Calvinism that I know what the debate is about. So I'm trying to wrap my head around it, and there's not a lot of discussion about it. But this is basically it. There is a logical order in God's mind, whether he chose who would be elect and then chose for the fall to happen, or whether he chose for the fall to happen and then chose who would be elect. That's the difference. Now, clearly, from a Calvinist perspective, these are logical orders. This is God always knew what he was going to do, what was going to happen, and he did not decide at one point, I'm going to allow this to happen, and then a century later decide I'm going to do this, and then create the world in time and space, because God is outside of time. So these are things to try to describe the mind of God, how he decided to frame the world, which he would have always known. It's not like there's a limit to that knowledge. God always knew he was going to create the world just such this way. We speak about how God framed it. We speak of a logical order. So we don't criticize either one of these views, like God did not look forward to the fall and look forward to the cross or anything else and say and make his decision based on that. You can't critique either one of these views by some sort of grounding objection. So you can't critique Molinism the same way. The levels of God's knowledge are a logical order. A logical order exists. It's not chronological. It's not God, and the comparison people keep using is the Doctor Strange time stone, like the Avengers Endgame. He looks through a billion scenarios and finally decides on one. That's not an accurate representation of what the Molinist is saying God did. The Molinist is saying God has always had this knowledge of all worlds that could have been created, all worlds that are feasible, and then the one world that he was going to create. Those are all logical steps, not chronological steps. Those are things God has always known. God has always known what kind of worlds can be created. God has always known what kind of worlds are feasible. God has always known what world he was going to create from eternity past. This knowledge was always in God, it was always a part of God, and God acted upon it, from our perspective, at the beginning. There is no such thing as a grounding objection. Everything, whether you take a supralapsarian, infralapsarian, or even a Molinist position, everything is contained inside the mind of God. Everything is a logical order. So in conclusion, you've created a dichotomy where God logically chooses election and the fall, not by basing it on Adam's actions or the actions of the elect, but you object to the idea that God has a logical order in the type of world, the timeline that he wants to create, because that would be grounded in something outside of himself. It can't be held up without scrutiny. It just doesn't follow.